Hey guys, there's a bunch of different objections I could address in these videos that I make, but I think the ones that I'm most interested in are the ones that I used to believe. They are especially interesting to me. And this is one of those ideas that I had never really examined, that I had heard people say, especially on the left. This isn't about left or right, but this is especially popular. I've heard this a lot. We need to breed the good guys. Now, if you don't know, this channel is called The Child Choice, and it is about exactly that. It's about the choice of whether or not to procreate children through childbirth, okay? And it's very much outside the Overton window. There are a lot of objections we meet, a lot of unexamined beliefs that this unearths in conversations with people. So I've been really enjoying the discourse around this, engaging in the discourse that strays a lot into ethics, goes into our understandings of the world and the human condition. I haven't necessarily engaged many people in this, but this is one of those ideas that I believed, you know? We need to breed the good guys. You know, if you're someone who is morally virtuous, you know, you are a responsible person, you minimizing your harm to others, you could have a child and you could teach that child to be virtuous like you. And then that's +1 on the good guys side, all right? On the team of the goodies. Like if you imagine it like Lord of the Rings, you know, you got the orcs and you got the humans. The humans have got to breed so that they outnumber the orcs, so that they can beat back the orcs, right? It's like this, what we might call this philosophy of a war of the womb, right? A war of the womb kind of idea. Some people might not see it like that. Some people might not see it as extreme. They might say, no, it just means that if you teach your child to be a responsible, nice member of the community, then that's okay. But we're going to get into all the ways that I think, especially for people on the left, how it runs against their values actually. And I think if they think about this a little bit deeper, they're going to realize that this sentiment, this idea really doesn't mesh with their pre-existing values. The more you think about this, the more weird it gets, the more messed up it actually becomes. Let me just put my critiques up on the board first, and then we can explore it in different ways. And I am arguing with my past self here. I am confronting idea that I had heard, that I kind of adopted as my own because I'd heard people in environmentalist circles, and nowadays I'm pretty disillusioned with this idea. Where to even start? I mean, I think that this idea really seems to allude to genetic determinism. And in fact, there's a great scene from a Mike Judge film called Idiocracy, which I think encapsulates this idea really strongly. I'll put this as the Mike Judge, I think this is how you spell his name. I could be wrong. Sorry if I spelled Mike Judge's name wrong.
Having kids is such an important decision.
We're just waiting for the right time. It's not something you want to rush into, obviously.
No way.
Oh shit, I'm pregnant again!
I got too many damn kids. Thought you was on the pill or some shit.
Hell no!
Must have been thinking of Brittany.
Brittany! No, you didn't! There's no way we could have a child now. Not with the market the way it is, no.
God, no. That just wouldn't make any sense.
Come on over here, bitch! He don't care about you!
Yeah, well, there must be something he likes over here.
You mean nothing to me, baby? Oh, shit. It wasn't me! It wasn't me!
But the Mike Judge depiction of this is that you have these two different classes of people. You have the educated middle class people who are like overly responsible, overly careful with the way that they are conducting themselves, and they're using too much contraception and therefore they're not having kids. So their population is going down in the future, and then the population that's going up is like depicted as trailer trash. You know, these irresponsible people with like having like 9 kids because they don't understand how contraception works. They're really dumb. They're depicted in this kind of way in this movie, and therefore in the future the main character goes in a time machine to the future and everyone is a complete idiot. Okay, everyone's IQ is like really, really low. Okay, so it's obviously it's a comedy film. It's not trying to be serious, but I think actually explores this idea, and it's an idea that I think a lot of people really vibe with, and it's kind of popular, at least in an unexamined way. This idea that dumb trailer trash type people are going to breed, and they're going to outbreed responsible people, well-to-do, middle-class, thoughtful people. I just want to butt in on myself here and add that this is focused on IQ. Now, Peter Thiel, as far as I'm aware, is fucking over the human race in a way that low IQ individuals are not capable of doing. And there are animal species with low IQs like sheep that are perfectly harmless to themselves and to other species. And you could say that same about many of the world's most despotic rulers, Stalin, Hitler, Netanyahu. These are not low IQ individuals. So even if you take the natural selection idea to be a serious one when it comes to IQ, that is a massive red herring. Temperaments like an aversion to violence exist pretty independently from one's intelligence. If this is a future where everyone has room temperature IQs and are relying on legacy technology from their ancestors, but there are no wars or genocides, is that really such a bad future? And I think this idea is bullshit. And I think when you start to critically examine this idea, it is actually horrifying what you are implying with this. You're implying genetic determinism, for one thing, that people's potential as humans, whether it be their intelligence or their sense of civic responsibility, is genetically determined. There are strains of genes that are the good guy genes and the bad guy genes, and that you happen to have the good guy genes and you need to perpetuate them through this war of the womb type behavior, right? You need to outbreed the bad guys. And I think this is prejudice. You know, this is a very old idea that class runs in the blood, you know, the aristocracy, who is determined to rule the country, the monarch. It's in their blood, it's in their DNA that they are fit to rule and you are not. And it's not to do with the environment, it's nature over nurture. And you have some kind of duty to perpetuate your genes. It's popular on the right as well, but it's especially ironic, it's especially hypocritical of the left, that leftists think that, you know, that the good guys is genetically determined. It's in reality, you know, it's about things that have nothing to do with who's breeding more. It's about, you know, education. If you want to have more good guys, you can educate them. Let me see if I can flesh this out. Are you destined to be the same as your parents? Right? Are you condemned to live the exact same life as your parents because of your genetics? See, when I apply this to you, this genetic determinism, you're going to reject it, right? But you are projecting that into this statement. You're condemning the so-called bad guys with this. You're saying it's not up to you whether or not you decide to become a better, more responsible, more caring, kind person. This is what's implied. This is the evil of genetic determinism. Yes, I am kind of pulling it out of here. I guess it's kind of laying subtly, it's within this statement. But this is a very problematic statement to believe. Perhaps you don't believe that you need to, but perhaps you believe that it would be good. It would be preferable if you were to breed someone into existence and that they would become a good person. And this is before we've gotten into the alternatives, right? So condemning someone, saying that this fully formed human, this complex, intelligent human, has no chance of becoming better through things like education and reform. You know, reforming laws, repealing laws, changing laws, updating social norms and things like that. I mean, this is what we typically do to advance society forwards. Like, this is the actual approach that you believe in other areas of your life. So it's kind of wild to me that this is different when it comes to childbirth. And the reason for that, I think, and this is what's really hiding behind these kind of arguments, is that it's a pronatal excuse, right? It's a pronatal excuse. And the actual underlying thing is not that you think that the good guys need to breed in this war of the womb. The actual thing is that it's an excuse for you to do something selfish. And in this case, that selfish thing is to carry forward your genes, your genetic code. And that is selfish, right? Also, in the bigger picture, who gives a shit whose DNA is carried forward into the next thing? That's your lizard brain talking, right? That's something really carnal and deep within your genetics, and you're kind of condemning yourself if you decide to just mindlessly play into it. You've lost against your body, against your biological predisposition. You're not the master of yourself if you believe that bullshit about carrying forward your genes. Why do you want to carry forward your genes? Why does it matter that your DNA gets carried forward and not someone else's? Do you have exceptional genes? Do you have the genes of a ruler? Is your name Elizabeth Windsor? No. That's the Queen of England, by the way, who recently passed away. No, you don't have exceptional genes. You have genes. Everyone has genes. And who really gives a fuck? Who really gives a fuck if it's your genes or someone else's genes? Yeah, back in the Dark Ages, you know, there would be a king ruler, and it mattered a great deal to the country who was being ruled, who was the monarch, and whose blood flowed in those veins, whose ancestry can be traced back, because that is what society relied on for political stability. Nowadays, we don't live in a monarchy, we live in a democracy. We've completely changed that feudal system to a completely different system, which is done through voting. It doesn't matter. Genetics don't matter. The only reason they matter is to some kind of form of your ego that has this weird undercurrent of like eugenics or genetic determinism, this condemning nature where you ignore these tried and tested actual methods for making each generation better than the one that came before. And it has nothing to do with the war of the womb. I think I've critiqued that sufficiently. I've got one more concern about this. It's the assumption that when good guys breed, they are guaranteed to create more good guys. Right? You're imagining that when good people procreate, as a consequence, it's like guaranteed that they're going to be good guys. That is bullshit. And I shouldn't even need to say this, but we gotta unpack this, guys. What if it's the opposite? What if you bring a pedophile into existence, right? And you are exposing that as a risk, being violent. They could have a lack of self-control, like psychopathic. They could have no remorse if they're doing crimes. And they could have a predisposition to liking young children. So you are actually creating an unnecessary risk by choosing to expand the human population. It's already 8 billion people on the planet, right? 8 billion with a B people, but you want to add more. You want to add more. And the opposite is actually statistically going to happen. So this assumption, you really need to challenge this. They could become murderers. They could become domestically violent, have a short temper, you know, a fragile person with a short temper. And this could be, you know, these kind of people come from very well-to-do households as well. You know, it's not just a finance thing. It's not a class thing. I mean, this is, yes, that could exacerbate, that could increase the likelihood, but PDF file, right? There you go. challenge that assumption. Do you think that the parents of murderers, of school shooters, of pedophiles, do you think that when they were budding parents that they predicted that their child would turn out to be violent, would turn out to be exploitative, right? They didn't predict that, otherwise they wouldn't have had that child, right? So none of the parents of these criminals seem to predict that that would happen. And what makes you so clairvoyant that you think that you can predict how they're going to turn out? Through procreation, right? It's a gamble. This is what I'm saying. It's a gamble. It's a dice roll. You don't know. And the fact that it is a dice roll with a real possibility of it going very badly is irresponsible. Okay? So just in the same way that someone from a bad household can go on to become a good person, someone from a good household with good parents can go on to become a bad person. And this speaks to a larger issue, a larger delusion that parents have, that biological parents have. And that's I've talked about this before. The illusion of control. You don't have absolute control over how your biological offspring is going to turn out. And this is something you really need to get into your head. You're not in control. And in fact, you are given this moment of grace in your life before conception, where you can, because we have contraception, you are afforded a choice of whether or not to roll the dice. This is a gift. It's a gift that many generations past were not gifted with because they didn't have the means of contraception, or they didn't have the education around contraception, okay? Contraception is an incredible gift to the human species, to the human race. Now let's become a little bit more constructive, right? I'm gonna help you here. I'm gonna help you with an alternative. So these are my critiques. I'm just gonna put them like that. Right, they're my critiques. And you're probably saying right now, what do you mean? So we shouldn't have kids? Well, you have to consider, the idea here is that there's a good intention to this. So you need to think about the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. People who choose to become parents, especially parents of multiple kids, they're out of action for nowadays, at least 18 years, probably 20 years, you're going to have your kids living under your roof because of the state of the economy. It's not like it used to be. Okay, so for 20 years of the prime of their life, where they have their physical faculties are all there, for 20 years they're just out of action because they're changing nappies, they're changing diapers, they're driving their kids to football practice and stuff like that. They are not able to work at full capacity to do these changes that you intend to do, right? They can't make the world a better place because they're driving their kids to football practice. So the opportunity cost for procreation is massive, massive, right? I'm an uncle, got a very young niece, and my niece's parents, I can ask them, hey, what movies did you watch? No, we haven't watched any movies. We don't watch any movies now. We don't have time. Okay, what do you do for hobbies? Oh, we don't have any hobbies now. We don't have any hobbies. We don't have any time. And this is going on for years, you know? It takes a long time for a child to grow up. But let's say you're good at this. You're good at raising a child. You consider yourself to be really good at teaching someone in a way where they will become responsible. They'll be vegan, right? Because it's important that they are not paying for the animal holocaust, right? We can get into that whole thing as well. I'd be happy to, right? But most people financially, they grow up to financially contribute to this ongoing animal holocaust against farm animals specifically and marine life, okay? There's about 1.4 trillion animals that are killed to meet the voracious appetite of non-vegan humans, and your child is likely to contribute to that unless you really teach them well. But let's say you are, let's say you're a vegan, and you're adamant, you teach your child to be a vegan who respects all animals. Great, you're off to a good start, I'd say. But the opportunity cost here, you could have adopted. You could have adopted, and this is a double whammy. If you're really doubling down on this and you're all in, and you actually have the sincere intention to make the world a better place through child rearing, you don't have to create a life to do that. You can adopt. You can adopt a child, and you're actually potentially a child in a foster home. That's a very troubled upbringing to be in a foster home, and that child could, in later years, if they're not kind of rescued from that system and brought into a loving household, a caring household, they could go on to become a criminal. In fact, statistically, they're more likely to become criminals. You can rescue one person, one life from that, instead of just bringing in another life, another one on the 8 billion people that's already here, right? You could adopt. Or you could teach other kids. You know, you could go to schools. You could teach these values onto the next generation. Why does it have to be your kid? That is a pronatal excuse, and it's selfish. Why does it have to be yours? That is a selfish reason. Try and find me a non-selfish reason to bring another life into existence. And try and be specific. Don't just say, oh, life's more good than bad. Why should it be your DNA? And why can you not bestow education? Why can you not reform the way that society is, improve society, vote in a way that's responsible? Why can't you, be an activist, right? And reform society for the people who are already here. My battery's running out, hold on. Okay, sorry about that, I needed to change cameras. The last point I want to say, so you're saying with this, we need to breed the good guys so that they can continue this war, not a war, but they can continue the good fight. Is it their responsibility to do that? Like, why are you creating new lives to do that when you could be sorting out that mess? Like, you're bringing in another person into the world, another person, which is already, it's like more likely, you're kind of setting that off in a way where it's more likely that person's presence there will exacerbate the problem. But let's just say they do. Why is it their responsibility? Why is it their responsibility to fix this shit? That's a huge undertaking for someone. And isn't it kind of selfish that you're saying, like, for the good of the world, I'm going to put a backpack on your back and you're going to go out there, fix things in this fucked up situation, right? That's not very selfless. That's not caring for the individual that you're bringing in. So I think it's a bit like slavery. You're forcing these problems on someone when you didn't need to. This person doesn't need to be here. It doesn't need to be their problem to solve. You want them to solve it for some reason when you are already here and you want this problem to be solved. Okay, fine, that's something you want. So you go out and fix it then. Why do you have to bring another person in and put a bunch of problems and tasks on them? Let's say they even refuse that call and they don't, and they just want to live, okay? And they just want to live a nice, peaceful, happy life, okay? So they're not going to go out and be a hero. Well, what then? Have you failed? So your plan has fallen through. But even then, they're going to need to do things like taxes, right? This person's going to be a slave to the system if they're going to want to have a reasonable life. If they want to just live a reasonable life, they're going to have to do things like they're going to have to go down to the bureau. They're going to have to file their living situation. They're going to have to do paperwork. They're going to have to do taxes, these mundane things. They're going to have to work in a boring job. They're going to have to be bored out of their mind as a cashier, and they're going to be constantly worrying about the threat of machines taking their jobs if they work in a kiosk or something. All these worries, and they're all because of you, because you decided that you want them to save the world. And this is not an argument of whether or not the human species should continue to exist. The human species will continue to exist. That's the world we're living. That's the realistic situation, right? So this is not a question of whether or not existentially humans should have the right to be here. Humans are here. Humans are here, and there's 8 billion of them on the planet. There are less jobs, less homes for everyone, less livable habitat. Sea level rise is going to be flooding coastal cities. Most of human civilization is based on coastal areas, right? You want to just keep expanding the population. Why? And why does it matter that it's your genetics that are doing it, okay? So you're not even serious about this claim. You are not trying to fight this war. You're actually not trying to save the world yourself, and you're certainly not bringing in more kids with the purpose of doing that. It's just something you say to yourself so that you give yourself the option of procreating. Humans like the idea of perpetuating their genes forward, of these genetic dynasties like kings and queens. We fancy ourselves as royalty, and it's a hubris problem. Is this just something you tell yourself because there's a hedonistic motive to doing what everyone else does, and you want to be able to do what everyone else does so that you don't face any kind of stigma? I mean, part of the reason why I've made this channel is to bring down some of the stigma around the child choice, especially for people who don't want to have children, right? Which it's actually the more reasonable choice. I think that's all the points I'm going to make on this. I think I've talked enough about this. Okay, that's the end of the video. See you in the next one.